I'm going to hit record. And I want to thank everyone for coming tonight. We have one of my favorite guests and humans to chat with the Elevate team. We have Dr. Ross here tonight, and he's such an expert in his field of sports psychology and the mind and the mental game. And we all know how important it is to have a strong mental game. How many times have we been in a training run or in a long run or a race, and our mind starts to take over, and then all of a sudden we're not performing to the best of our abilities. So Dr. Russ is here tonight. He is from Denver, which is amazing too. And he's going to share with us some tips on how to flow through that and how to gain a stronger mindset as we gear up. Houston's 5 weeks away. We have a team on here. We have quite a few people racing Houston. And then we also have quite a few people racing and running the Boston Marathon as well. And then I also want to give a big shout out to Jessie. She's on, and she's running her marathon and looking to BQ on Saturday morning.
Thanks.
Yay, Jessie. You're welcome. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Ross. And Justin, if you want to give more of an intro, go for it, but I'm going to give it over to you.
Well, thanks for having me, Sarah. It's always so much fun to chat with your athletes and with your group. And so just really honored and privileged to be invited back. So thanks for that. And full disclosure, I have prepared nothing tonight. You're welcome. I was hoping to keep this just really kind of informal. And I'm happy to talk about stuff, but I'd love to just maybe have a more dialogue based, answer questions, and let you, the athlete, your group, kind of direct and guide this conversation. Maybe just a little bit more background for everybody to know about me. So I'm a clinical psychologist by background. I spend most of my life in health and wellness and human performance pursuits. I'm vetted in the NBA and the NFL, so I work in those arenas a fair bit. I've done a lot of work with the U.S. Olympic Committee in various different pursuits. I spend a lot of my time working with amateur athletes. Amateur means for the love. And so that, myself included, right, doing sport because it fills me up personally and it has a big place in my life personally, but not because it's how I pay my mortgage or feed my family. So I work with a lot of athletes in that arena. From an athletic career perspective, for me, for people may want to know, 12-time marathon runner, 6 BQs, personal best in the marathon's 2:57. I've run a bunch of triathlons, half Ironman 70.3 particularly. And then the past 18 months, I've kind of transitioned away from running and fallen back in love with cycling. So this year I rode the Leadville Trail 100 mountain bike race was kind of my big event for the year. So that's kind of my stuff in a nutshell. I'd love to just maybe go around and, if people feel comfortable introducing yourself, who you are, where you're at in the country, what you're training for, what your goals are, and any burning questions, topics, or things I can answer, or your hopes for what you can get out of this session tonight. That would be a great place to start. And if it's all right, I'm just going to go around the horn based on how you're presented visually to me, and Brandon, that means you're up first. So I'm going to call on you.
Hey, how's it going? Brandon. I live in Houston. I'm training for the Houston Marathon in January. So is my 3-year-old. This is William.
What's up, William?
My goal is probably a sub 3:30. Looking to get out of this, just anything and everything I can put in my toolkit. As I was talking right before you hopped on, I've got 22 miles this weekend, so I'm looking for some immediate practical application this weekend. Looking forward to hearing from it.
Yeah, sounds good. So it sounds like kind of practical, not only some practical tips for long run, but also then thinking about mental tips for race day preparedness to go sub 3:30.
Yep,
sounds good. Matt, you're next on the horn.
Sorry, I was still on the mute button. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Ross. I'm in Denver. Just ran the Indy Monumental training for Boston, getting to work on kind of my goals for the coming year. The end of Indy was tough, and probably a little mental scar tissue from the wins and challenges kind of the second half of the race. So might have some questions on kind of getting over that. And then also one of the things that was on my mind for today was, I think a lot of times we hear kind of, the bodies can do X% more than we think it can, and maybe some thoughts and maybe questions we'll have on, how much more we can push ourselves than we think we can to reach our goals.
Yeah, which is I love that space, because that's really where I spend a lot of my time thinking is our mind is going to shut our performance down before our body really needs to give way. And that is ultimately, I think, the beauty of endurance sports is we have this, it's like a playground between our mental game and our mental approach and what's happening in our bodies. And the true ability to get the most out of ourselves and to reach those goals is being skillful in that moment, right? To be able to work on that in training so that when it comes time for racing, you're able to kind of carry that with you and not have those things slow you down so much. So yeah, I could definitely speak to that, Matt. Thanks for your comments. Jason, you're up next.
Hi there, I'm Jason Delavan. I live in Denver, and my next, I have a 5K coming up, but my next big race is Boston. And the thing that I think about a lot these days is kind of the bigness of Boston. This will be my first Boston, or first marathon outside of Colorado, for heaven's sake. So, so the thing that kind of weighs on my mind is the bigness of it, and calming myself down to just let it be another race and just a fun experience. But also, I know I'm going to train hard and I want to do well, but not getting too psyched out with the fact that, wow, this is Boston, and oh my gosh, I'm going to be like a squirrel running around and then lose it all by mile 5.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I mean, congratulations. Boston's amazing, right? It's incredible. And I'll leave this thought here for now. We'll come back to it. What if there is no such thing as a big moment or a big stage? And there's this delicate balance between, like, I want it to be big for people because it's exciting, and that's part of the draw, but yet finding a way to be anchored in not allowing sort of all the hoop and hoopla and history to make it feel anything more than just running 26 miles, right? And so there are ways that we could talk about that. So yeah, I appreciate that comment, Jason. Danielle, you're next on my screen.
Hi, my name is Danielle. I am in Denver as well. I am currently not running. I'm currently injured, but so just had to drop out of a race, but kind of just wanted to hear your thoughts on, the mental toll that kind of injury takes. And then, like, once the injury kind of settles and getting back into training, like how to kind of combat those fears of like losing fitness and like not being in the same place I was, a few weeks ago. Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear you're injured. Being injured sucks. Like, just let's put a period at the end of that sentence, because it's true. Yeah. The psychological impact of injury is really profound, in my opinion. And there's a lot of nuance and variation that can occur there. So let's absolutely make time for that in the conversation today. Because I think, again, like, one, validating and normalizing it makes sense. And then trying to give some ideas for what you can do about that is also something we can do as well. So glad you're here. Sorry to hear about the injury.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Lauren.
Hello, I'm Lauren. I live in New York, and I ran my first 2 marathons this year. My goal was to run the second one sub-4. Unfortunately, I did not meet that goal. So that's my goal for next year. But more importantly, I want to be able to get through the mental block of not being able to run the entire thing. I stopped both times and had to walk through some. And I really want to just be able to run 26.2 miles without stopping to walk. So that's really my goal.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great goal, right? Because it's like recognizing your personal challenge and then having sort of the mental strength to bat back the messages, because the messages in your mind of slowing down and walking started long before you made the decision to slow down or walk. And so being, again, skillful in that moment, I think is really, really important. We can absolutely talk about that tonight, Lauren.
Thank you.
Yeah, Brandon.
I already went. I went first.
You went first. You changed on my screen. How did you do that?
Sorry, I had to turn my camera off.
Dang it. I gotta be, that's my fault. I should be paying better attention. I apologize.
Oh, you're good.
Anchor.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah. So I go by Anchor. Some people pronounce it Encore. Either way, I live in Oklahoma City. So I don't get the privilege of training with the team, etc. I just, watch them through Strava or whatever. But so I've been running for a couple of years. I am only half crazy, so I've never done a full marathon actually. Just I think mostly a work time commitment issue. I think the things that intrigue me from the perspective of the psychological aspect of running and endurance sports is, I think one of them is the fear of failure. I am trying to decide when I should sign up for my next race, and part of me I think is like, am I not signing up? I know I can do it. Am I not signing up though because I'm afraid of failure, or I have this sort of anchoring bias to previous races, right? And you always want to get better. But is the point of a race always to get a PR, or is there more to it? And I think the answer is the latter, obviously.
Yeah.
Then the other part is the injury part, and I think when you do come back from injury, there's always a fear of becoming injured again. And that's probably something that's hampered, I think, my performance sometimes is like, oh, I'm going to get injured. I need to just back off a little bit. So anyway, look forward to hearing what you have to say on these topics.
Well, yeah, I appreciate all those thoughts. I mean, first thought on that I'll share tonight is, I think, we can either train and race from a place of love, or we can train and race from a place of fear. And when we're in a place of love is expansive, right? And love can connect us to curiosity, to willingness, to desire. Fear is restrictive, and fear will really narrow our perspective physiologically, psychologically, even visually, right? When we're in a fear-based state, our vision narrows because we're protecting ourselves. And I think about that concept a lot, especially as it relates to amateur endurance athletes, because often what we fall into is we start from a place of love, almost always, like, this is fun, this is exciting, I'm enjoying this. And pretty soon it gets narrow, and now we're protecting something, right? It's like, oh, if I'm not running a PR, then what's the point? Like, the world knows me as this, so I have to always be pursuing and doing better. And now the thing that we once loved can suddenly feel like there's a lot of fear embedded in it, and we tie that to our performance. And so I challenge a lot of people when we get started is start there. Like, think about, like, are you training from a place of love, or are you training out of a place of fear? And how do you identify that on a daily basis? And then, like, where can we expand upon that? So I'm just going to pause and leave that concept there, because I think for me, it's that's an important starting point, but we'll come back to that. Thanks for sharing your thoughts. And my screen got all jumbled again. So this is like an attention exercise for me in my own mind. But Jane, I think you're next.
Hi, I'm so excited you're here. I was just telling Sarah tonight. I actually have a YouTube channel. She's my coach, but I'm coach also. But I've actually talked about you on my YouTube channel, and like podcasts that I've listened to, yours sticks out in my mind. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say. I guess a little bit different than maybe some of the other things, which all of those, I can't wait to hear what you have to say on those, but just confidence in general. And I think how social media plays into that as well, and not getting caught up in what everyone else is doing, everyone else's paces. I find that with myself as well as athletes, just, worrying about what everyone else is doing. So that's something I'd love to talk about.
Yeah, well, appreciate the kudos at the front. Thank you for that. I think so. Question I'll have everybody think about or write down is, where does confidence come from for you? How do you develop confidence? It's a really important concept, right? And then you're right, social. So Teddy Roosevelt has one of my favorite quotes: "Comparison is the thief of joy." Right, and he had that quote before social media was even a thing, right? So he was onto something way back when. And you're right, like social media is a beautiful thing, right? It can be really powerful and really influential. It can also really be detrimental. And when we're having that negative comparison or that comparison bias, somebody on Strava is always having the most amazing adventure, the best times, the fastest splits. Somebody's always faster, and so we can get caught up in that game pretty quickly. So we need to have a developed relationship with that. So yeah, we could talk about both those things for sure. Janny, I think you're next.
Hi, I'm Jamie and I'm in San Antonio. So yeah, don't get to train with a team, but I'm so glad to see everyone on there and always cheering for one another. And so that motivates me a lot too. So for me, I think also confidence and just like the race day, like lining up, with others around me. Sometimes I feel I don't belong there. Or how do you get, I'm not supposed to be in corral A, you know, although I got into it, like
Yeah,
I don't belong here. So the confidence, I think,
yeah,
even though I had a good training block and such, I still on race day, I feel like I'm basically, I don't belong in that spot.
hmm yeah. There's like a bit of imposter syndrome, right?
Hmm.
Like I shouldn't be
Yeah.
up. What am I doing up here? Like I don't belong
Yeah.
here, right?
Hmm.
It's like that self belief in terms of your time or your ability or your fitness. Is that doubt can often creep in, and
Hmm.
doubt. Use this term. It's a flow robber, right? So we talk about flow state, right? Doubt is going to kill flow. And so doubt can be an extension of anxiety. It can come out of a place of fear. And again, it's very workable. So
Hmm.
one of the big takeaways I hope everybody has tonight is any psychological state that you have, whether that's a thought or an emotional experience, is workable. And if we have a starting point of your mind is a highly trainable skill, well, then there's nothing to really be afraid of because you're going to be skilled enough to work with the nuance of any of those experiences, whether that's lacking confidence, being afraid, being sad and upset about an injury, worried about the expansiveness of a big race. Having the workability and the skill set helps you manage any and all conditions. So that's one of my hopes for tonight, is to give everybody on this call some tangible takeaways for how to do that. Let's see. I think Abby, you're next on my screen.
Sorry,
Hello.
Abby, is that okay?
Is it this
is
Abby
Oh,
or that?
I know.
I was going Abby B.
Okay.
Okay.
I've been called everything.
I'm Abby. I live in Minnesota, so I don't get to train with a team either. But I've done one marathon, been training with Sarah for a year as my coach now. And I'd say like one of the things I'm looking for is I've gotten better, but I have a really big give up button. Like once I don't, like in a set, if my pace is supposed to be X and I don't hit it that time, then I'm just like, okay, now I'm done for the workout. I've gotten a lot better, but still I can, I'm looking for ways to improve even more.
Yeah. You are not alone with that button. I love that. That's a great phrase. I love how you call that the give up button. I sometimes refer to it as you take the deal, right? And the deal is, I don't really need to work that hard today, or I don't really have it in there anyway, so why bother? So I'm just going to slow it down or walk away. And so, yeah, like the mental skills of staying in the pocket, staying in the moment to keep pushing, even if it's not what you want it to be, is workable for sure. And I'm going to screw up the name, so other Abby or Abaye.
Yeah, Abby, you got
Abby.
it. Yes. So I think mine would be similar to Janie's, just the confidence, wanting to learn how to be more confident. I ran a race on Sunday, and when we got to like mile 8, mile 10, I saw a bunch of carnage, like people grabbing their ankles. And I was like, why am I not grabbing my ankle? And I saw people grabbing their stomachs for cramps. And I was like, I should be cramping. And so that feeling of just like, maybe I'm doing this wrong. And so just wanting to have the confidence of like, nope, I'm good with my training. I should be here. I belong here would be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. That self-belief. Yeah. The confidence, right? Coming, like having a default standard. One of the things we'll talk about tonight is how do you create a default set of your own performance standards in your mind to execute upon, right? And there's a lot of examples of this. I had a lot of athletes just ran sim, just ran New York, just ran Indy, and some of those races weren't favorable in terms of weather. I knew a number of people who just straight up walked onto the subway at mile 8 of New York City because they're like, the hell with this. I'm not going to even bother with these conditions. So having performance standards, regardless of outcome, regardless of weather, is really, really important. So again, a question I just want everybody to think of here. If you had to write down what your performance standards are for yourself that you default to, regardless of what's happening, regardless of pace on your watch, regardless of conditions of a day, regardless of how you're doing in pursuit of your goal, what would you say there are? And some of you may be scratching your head like, I don't even, what the hell is this guy talking about? I have no idea. That's okay. We're gonna come up with creating that tonight, because I think performance standards time and time again, if executed correctly, are going to trump outcome goals and are going to lead to not only deeper connection and enjoyment in sport, but they're ultimately going to lead to performance, executing when you really need to. So we'll get to that as well. Let's see, we got a handful of others. I think Dina, you're next.
Hi, I'm Dina. I'm Denver area, train with Sarah. I think one of the things I wanted to talk about, pretty much what you just said, but adjusting goals to weather, to different conditions. If I'm on like a recovery day or I just did a race, kind of like mentally adjusting for that.
For sure. Yeah, flexibility, right? Psychological flexibility is a really important skill, and being able to have clear goals, but flexibility within those goals is really important. We'll probably, once we get through everybody, we'll probably start with that kind of goal orientation piece. So, Jessica.
Jesse, do you want to contribute?
Did you say my name?
Yeah. Yeah.
My headphones died. The phone's almost gonna die. Okay. So hi, I'm Jesse. I live in Michigan and I am in South Carolina right now. So I have a marathon on Saturday. This will be my 25th marathon, 23rd state. And so my goal is to BQ. And I'm just hoping, I think for me, my mental struggle, like I've had 2 kids, so I think I'm just comparing myself to my former pre-kid self. And it just is taking me a lot longer to come back than I expected. So I think just comparing, I know comparison again is deep of joy, just even to myself.
Sure.
I have expectations on where I should be at and how the marathon should feel. And it's just not coming out like how it is playing out kind of thing. So I have higher expectations for myself that are not following through.
Yeah, the discrepancy between like where you'd like to be or where you think you should be and where you're at can create the bigger the discrepancy, the bigger the pain typically. And if there's a wide gap, it can feel really frustrating. It sounds like having some walkthroughs on that would be helpful. And then some tips to go and BQ would be maybe helpful as well.
Of course. I know Coach Sarah gave me some good tips too, but it's got to execute it.
Pro. Yeah, for sure. Okay. Brandon.
I already went. I went first.
Dude, did I call on you 3 times now? What's wrong with me?
That's cool.
Damn it.
That's cool. I'm
Pay
in front
attention.
of mine.
Pay attention. I'm going to just keep, that's going to be the running joke now. Just call on Brandon.
That's cool. I'm here. I ain't paying attention.
You keep jumping around on my screen. All right. Who didn't go? I think Denise. Yeah, I think Denise is maybe, and Jen. Yep, Denise and Jen.
I'm Denise. I'm in Minnesota and I don't train with the group either, sadly. wow, everything that everybody has said has been like spot on, and I'm super excited to hear what you have to say. For me, I've ran, I don't know how many, 14 marathons, and I actually ran 4 this past year, which is way too many, but that's just how it all played out. But what do you do? Like for me, like I now go into a race and I know what to expect, and that has stopped me from moving forward later in the race because I know what's coming. And so that's
Right.
getting over that hump of, I like to go back to when I was naive and dumb and just ran and did what I was supposed to do.
Right. Right. It's
So,
almost like you know too much now. And so you have
yes,
that front loading expectation of, oh boy, here it's coming.
yes.
And then, oh boy, here's what I do in response to that. And so then you don't quite get over the hump to reach the goals that you want. Okay. Jen.
Saving the best for last. No, I'm just kidding.
I think we have
Um,
Brandon. Doesn't Brandon need to go
Oh
yet?
yeah, don't forget Brandon.
Oh, yeah, I gotta
I
get
want
to
to hear what
Brandon.
he has to say. I'm in New Mexico. I'm training for my first marathon. I'm hoping to BQ on my first marathon.
Mhm.
And I'm kind of a blank slate. Like, I guess I'm the one that like is naive and doesn't know what's coming. So I'm just looking for tips and
Yeah.
what should I know? And because I have no idea what's coming.
Yeah. Oh, it's exciting. Like the ability and the willingness to go find out is what this is all about. I'm a big believer that, especially endurance sports, it really, I think what we do is this is a chance for our own self-discovery, right? And I think we really pursue this because we're curious. Like, I want to know what really happens. What happens? How do I handle pressure? How do I handle discomfort? How do I show up when things get hard? Because inevitably, whether you're, this could happen if you're ripping an 800 on a track, or if you're running a marathon or do something longer. At some point, if you're really pushing yourself, it's going to get uncomfortable. And your relationship with discomfort determines not only how you feel about yourself, but how you perform in that moment. And those who have learned how to lean into that are the ones who keep coming back, right? And keep exploring and keep finding value in the pursuit. So we'll talk a lot about that as well. And I do believe, I think, Jesse, did you just hop on? Jesse and Ken, are they maybe a couple new folks that just got on the call?
I just switched phones. So
You just switched. Okay, and Ken? Where did Ken go? Maybe I'm making that up. Okay. Well, last but not least, Sarah, let's go to you. What are your goals? What are thoughts that come to mind? How might this be helpful for you?
For sure. Yeah. And Ken just joined. So Ken can follow after I go. So first and foremost, I feel like, or I know that I definitely can relate to every single one on this call. I think as you go through your journey as an athlete, I think you go through all of these cycles. You go through like the imposter syndrome and the comparison trap and that gap of where you want to be versus where you are. And I've had all of that come up in the past, but I would say, looking towards running the Houston half, I'm feeling very confident about that. I know the course, I know the distance. I would say after that, I'm running the Boston Marathon. So it's overcoming the pain that I feel when I think of that course from 2021, and also the pressure that I have or that I put on myself to compete at a certain level because I am a coach and a lot of people are looking up to me to be successful. And what does that look like? What does that mean? And we've talked about that before, and it's still there. So kind of flowing through that.
Yeah, that's a really common one. Thanks for sharing that. And it's really common for coaches. And it's really common for I think a lot of athletes just in general, right? It's almost like this idea of I'm not a runner until, right? And I've worked with people who said, I'm not a runner until I break 5 hours in the marathon. I've also had runners who say, I'm not a runner until I qualify for the Olympic trials. Who've said, I'm not a runner until I'm on the Olympic team. I'm not a runner until I qualify for Boston, or insert any goal there. And what I love about that is it is so near and dear to our hearts. Regardless of time, regardless of what the goal is, we feel as though we're not really runners until we hit some artificial standard for ourselves. So one, we just have to level the playing field and recognize that that's normal. And it can really create that sense of imposter syndrome. I really see that with coaches, right? Like it's almost like we internalize this idea of like, oh, I'm not allowed to like not be faster or PR or reach a goal because I'm supposed to be the expert here and the one who knows. Well, the truth is like this is a hard sport and there are 1,000,001 variables that could get in the way of reaching those goals. And that doesn't mean you don't know your stuff or you're not valued as a coach or you don't know how to train other people. Like this sport's hard, and especially marathon running when you get, anywhere from 2 to 4 cracks at it a year, weather plays a huge role. And if the weather doesn't cooperate for some reason, it can really derail our goals. So all of those things are worth discussing. I do want to make sure we give Ken a chance. Ken, we were just kind of going through quick introductions and hopes for what you may want to get out of this call here tonight. And maybe we'll just hop in. How about that? So I want to start with this. I want to start with a general overview of like how we landed on this idea of performance psychology in the first place, because I think like how we got here is really important and it dictates where we're going. But to do this, I'm hoping everybody can get a little bit silly with me as I explain this. So I want everybody take your right or left arm, doesn't matter, and just hold it straight up above your head. Okay, just hold it there. Okay, you're going to hold it there while I talk, and I'll explain why in a minute. Okay, so how we got here in performance psychology is the original working model around understanding limiters of performance were really based on physicality. And the first idea was, we have central nervous system and we have peripheral, muscles and bones. And what will happen is the idea is, well, once you reach a certain level of fatigue, you're just not gonna be able to perform anymore. Now, even doing this right now, you're accumulating fatigue. Yeah, we got little ones in on the action too. I love this, right? So you're accumulating fatigue, right? And in a minute or two, you're gonna have to make some decisions about what you do with that, right? Which gets us into the second thing that we started to learn. There's a theory that came out that's called the central governor theory. This came out of South Africa by an MD named Timothy Noakes. And he posited that, the brain is actually really evaluating what's happening. And it's not so much fatigue that gets in the way. It's when your brain determines that what's happening in your body is going to be detrimental to your well-being. So once your brain says, you're kind of at critical mass here, you got to shut it down so that you don't cause irreparable damage or irreparable harm, right? That's what we're going to do, right? So eventually it's going to shut down. Now, the third model, this is the working model that we utilize today. It's called the psychobiological model. And it comes to understand that our psychology plays a deep role in deciding how much pain you're willing to tolerate. And everybody here on this call is you're already like, oh my gosh, what is this thing? What am I doing? I'm feeling it. It's starting to bother me, but I'm not going to back down because look at these other people. I got to be the last person standing. So all of these psychological variables play a deep relationship in terms of our relationship with discomfort and pain, right? And those variables are a few things, and you're feeling it right now. And these are things that we play on as we're thinking about training and racing. The first is your general motivation. So what's your motivation for doing this right now? And maybe your motivation in this moment to tolerate discomfort is, I just want to beat my teammates, right? I'm just going to beat my teammates. I've done a version of this with cross-country teams on the high school and college level. And I will do this. I'll just start talking. And eventually these kids are like, this guy's a joke, or I'm going to put my arm down. And they do. Then I take out a $20 bill and I say, all right, last person standing gets the 20. And pretty soon it's on, right? And I've had college kids keep their arm up for 90 minutes, right? Because of that motivation. Motivation is huge. The deeper the motivation, the more it matters to you, the more you're willing to tolerate this, right? And this is just a metaphor for the physical discomfort or pain you're going to feel in sport. That's part one. Part two is your cognitive appraisal of discomfort. So right now, everybody in their mind is you're having this relationship with what's going on. You're having self-talk, you're having a narrative like, oh my God, this sucks. This is so hard. Can't believe I'm doing this. It's really starting to bother me. Right. And the more that those self-talk things go towards that place of pain and discomfort, as well as your ability to handle it, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. The more likely you're going to drop that arm. Cognitive appraisal is so important. The third part is willingness and curiosity. Your willingness to stick it out is largely based on your curiosity about what it's like, what the experience is like, how long you can sort of play with that without it bothering you. And when you put all of those things together, those really become the psychological variables for endurance performance. Your willingness and curiosity, your cognitive appraisal, your mental approach to what's happening, and your motivation to continue, despite a very clear mounting desire to stop, right? So now please feel free to put your arm down if you'd like, or if you want to be, if you want to have last person standing contest, like have at it. It's your call, right? But I would love feedback on this moment because it's both, hopefully a little bit playful, but hopefully a little bit uncomfortable, right? Did anybody not feel discomfort doing that? Raise your hand. Just kidding. But that was uncomfortable, right? So those are the three factors. So I just want to pause there and leave a chance if there's any comments or any feedbacks or any pieces of any thoughts that people have about that exercise or about those three pillars of performance that we're starting with.
So you should have told us to put our arm up that we didn't write with, so we could have written it. So,
right.
You said in terms of like able to overcome pain,
Yep.
how much it matters to you, curiosity, and then what was the third one?
Yep. So motivation is really important. So we're going to start there. I'm going to riff on that. I'll make sure you get the question answered. The motivation is really, really important. And this is where, goal setting and being very clear about what you're pursuing and why is important, right? The more personally meaningful your goal is, whatever that is, the more likely you're going to fight for it in the moment when it's threatened, right? And this was a threat. Like in this moment, it didn't matter. But when you're feeling that same level of discomfort, you have to first be able to fall back on, okay, this really matters to me. And because it matters to me, I'm going to be willing to stick it out, right? Willingness and curiosity is that second part. That other piece is what's called cognitive appraisal, right? And that's just kind of fancy language for the mental approach that we have for what's happening either in our bodies or on our watches or our bike computers or in the world at large around us. And we have this dance, we have this narrative, we have this evaluation of self-talk of what it is that we're experiencing. Now, very broadly speaking, you can have this sort of version of, yes, it's uncomfortable. I got this. I know how to handle this. I'm able to focus on other things. I'm mentally strong. Or you can have a version of, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming. I don't have the ability to be successful. I better just slow down and mail it in, right? Those are, again, there's a lot of nuance in between, but one version sets us up for success and the other version does not. Again, I'm just pausing if there's feedback or comments that anybody wants to hop in.
I think one of the things I noticed was I was actually a little bit more focused because I was just kind of like in the moment, looking at what everyone else was doing. I wasn't kind of wandering and thinking about other things. So even though it wasn't like super comfortable, it kind of allowed me to be a little bit more present.
Yeah, it narrowed your focal point and your energy, right? Now, this could be sort of a good segue into a set of psychological skills that we call attentional control, right? And attentional control at its core is our ability to be focused in a specific way, to choose what we're paying attention to. Now, imagine, if you will, that there's a vertical axis and a horizontal axis for this concept. The vertical axis we're going to call internal and external, right? So even right now in the room that you're in, you could shift your focus to something internal, right? So you could feel like your sweatshirt on your body, your headphones in your ears, your feet on the floor. You could even pay attention to your thoughts in your mind, right? You could shift there. You could also focus externally, right? Like, what am I sensing around me? What does the room look like, feel like, smell like? What do I hear? Right? Internal to external. You can also channel that narrowly or broadly. So if I said, wiggle the big toe on your right foot, there it is, right? You could do that. You could really get narrow in terms of your focus, right? In a very granular way. If I said, all right, keep that broad, right? Get a broad sense of just how your body feels in space, internal, a broad sense of how the environment feels, what you can smell and hear and see. You can do that too. Now, the skill is being able to go through this kind of, if you have this setup, a vertical and a horizontal axis, you have 4 quadrants. So being able to cycle through each of them in a meaningful way with your attention and your focus is a really important set of skills as an endurance athlete, right? And there are times if you start external broad, right? I really recommend people start here. And you can do this in training, right? So you're out on your run tomorrow and you probably just do this intuitively anyway. Like, oh, kind of a sigh, feels good to be outside. I'm just kind of taking it all in. I'm soaking in the surroundings and what the path feels like, or the trail or traffic or the park or whatever. You just take it all in. But then you can narrow that down, right? So you narrow that down to like, oh, I'm just going to focus on that tree up ahead or that stop sign. I'm going to keep all my visual attention on that one thing and I'm going to work on getting there, right? So you can draw that in, right? You do the same thing then internally. You start broad. What am I feeling? How's my body feel today? How are my knees? How are my ankles? How are my joints? How's my breathing? How's my gait? How's my form? Where's my head at? Where's my emotion? What am I shaking off from what I just came from? Or what am I thinking about coming up ahead? But then you narrow that down in your mind too. And that narrowing down in your mind or in a focal part of your body is really important. That's where like positive self-talk or mantras live, is being able to then come back in a specific way in a specific time for a specific reason. Now, when the gun goes off at the beginning of a marathon, you don't need to be like all ooh rah rah in your mind, right? It's not like I got this. But when it gets hard, you have to be able to learn how to drive your attention there, to stay there, to be calm and collected, right? But also focused. And often what happens is our body is uncomfortable because we're working really, really hard. And that takes all of our time and our energy, right? It goes back to that model, right? When the pain signals are going off and we have this story about it in our minds, like, oh my gosh, this is so hard, I can't keep going, it's likely going to slow us down. So it's about being able to be calm and credible in your mind in that moment so that you can keep it up or that you can keep going or that you don't slip off the pace, right? And that is something, again, the mind is a trainable skill. Those are things we can work on a daily basis in your training. And again, just pausing for comments or thoughts, questions. Again, if we tie in the beginning, right, you can train from love or you can train from fear. In that moment, then it can be, love can be expansive. Oh, like look at this opportunity for me to, explore this, to be willing to sit here, to be curious about these sensations, to be curious about how long I can manage this. Fear is often, oh, I don't think I can handle this. This is too much. This really hurts. What if I'm causing damage, right? I better just shut it down, right? Or I don't want to be seen as like the person who's unsuccessful. So I just better shut it down, right? So again, thinking from that place, am I training from love or am I training from fears? It can really help set up the foundation for each of these areas. All right, so let's move that then into like a set of like thinking about goals, right? We talk about goals a lot, and SMART goals, etc. That's often the framework. The framework I usually try to talk people through is setting up sort of a hierarchy Sort of like if you think about, take a triangle or write a triangle and break it down so that there are 3 parts to it. And the bottom of the triangle, the biggest part is what we call process goals, right? So process goals are the day in, day out, things that you have 100% control over, right? And these are things like, you know, did you turn your boxes green, right? In Training Peaks, did you get the work done? Did you put in the energy and the effort for training and recovery and strength and nutrition and mental skills? Did you do the things? Did you engage in the process? The second part, the middle part, is what we call performance standards. And again, this is what I really encourage everybody on this call to be thinking about, like creating your own performance standards. Now, these are things that I would say are 80% within your control, but also tied a little bit to outcome, right? Which is the top of the pyramid. Performance standards are a default set of guiding principles that you're going to go back to regardless of what's happening. So if the rails come off and you're no longer hitting your splits, saying, what are my performance standards? Oh, I'm going to continue to push even though it's uncomfortable. I'm going to continue to be curious. I'm going to continue to have willingness. So often what we fall into, what I see so many people do, is they don't hit their time splits for the day's workout. And they just think, oh, I'm not getting any benefit from this, so I'm just not going to do any of it. Right. Well, no, but if you have the rate, you know, the rate of perceived exertion, right, or you have a standard of like, I'm going to continue to push and get the workout in, even though the paces aren't feeling comfortable. If you do that, you have that performance standard, that's going to ultimately lead to you gaining the benefits, right? The body doesn't really know pace. The body knows stimulus, right? And so if you can replicate what the workout needs, even though you're off pace, you're still getting the stimulus that your body's going to adapt to and grow stronger. Okay. Outcome goals are the top. It's the smallest part of the pyramid. And these are sort of, I like to think they're like 20% controllable, but 80% not. Right. And those are things like it all has to come together on race day, or, you know, even on a training day, right? Somebody who's got a 22 miler this weekend. And if you have like, I'm trying to hit these paces or do it in this time, there are a lot of variables that may play into that, right? And so again, what happens is outcome goals are fun to pursue, but when they're not happening, do you have a set of performance standards you can fall back to that really guide how you show up, right? Des has like the greatest quote here ever, right? Like, keep showing up, right? After she won Boston, that was like her guiding mantra. And that's what I really encourage everybody here to do. What are your performance standards that are going to guide your training, that are going to guide your racing, that are going to guide your efforts when you need them the most?
I absolutely love that. I know probably everyone on this call has heard me say, if you have a workout that doesn't translate to the time that we wanted, right? I still will comment saying it's a deposit in your training bank. If that effort is still there, it's still a huge win. And it's not just a physical win, but it's a mental win too, that you didn't give up. And that's, you know, a huge way to move forward in your training ultimately to race day. But also everyone's going to have a note in Final Surge about 2023 goals and scheduling time with me to talk through that. And also invitation to put together some performance standards, and we can talk about that too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such an undervalued part of this process that I think we would all benefit from having that conversation over, right? You're right. I mean, I think about that so much. We, again, maybe a topic point here. We love our times, and we all have this deep relationship with times, right? And we have identity that's tied to times, right? Whether that's outcome times or like what our slow time is, or recovery time is for our paces. And our relationship with times dictates so many things. And we often end up training not from a place of true physiological adaptation, but because we're ruled mentally by what we think we should be doing. And I see this happen so often. A group of my knucklehead running friends that I love dearly, Some have embraced this concept and have taken like true physiological training to heart, and they've gotten really fast. And other people are not, and they run their slow pace, their recovery pace, based on what they think is a slow pace, but physiologically it's not. They're not getting any better, right? Because they're letting their mind take over. So it's this sort of double-edged sword of how powerful the mind is. The mind can really dictate a lot of things, but we can get rigidly attached to numbers needing to be a certain way. And we feel so uncomfortable, maybe because it's on Strava, maybe because we're worried about what other people are going to see. Like, oh gosh, if they see me running, if this group sees me running X pace, like they're not going to think I know what I'm doing, right? They're going to be like, what's up? It's like, well, no, actually, you're probably the one doing it the right way. But we allow that to dictate our decisions. So it's something we all need to think about and maybe challenge a little bit too. So I asked a question earlier, where does confidence come from? So throw that back to the group. What do you got? Where does confidence come from?
Prior races, workouts. Sorry.
Yep, Matt. So I'm gonna make sure prior races, prior workouts, right?
I was just going to say, committing to doing something and then showing up and doing it.
Yep. Commitment, which requires belief. Yep.
Yeah, I would say also just hearing it. So whether it's you or a spouse or a coach saying, I believe in you, you can hit, 8-minute paces, you start to believe, maybe I can. So I think that helps too.
For sure. Social feedback. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You guys have hit on the big ones already. So the way we think about confidence, the theory is called self-efficacy, right? So self-efficacy is the overarching understanding of where confidence comes from and how it's built, right? The greatest cliche quote, Henry Ford, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Right. So we know that the mind is a powerful tool. The number one way that we build confidence, Matt, you said it from the beginning, it's your direct personal experience. Right. And we break this down. I'd encourage everybody to think about breaking that down in two ways. One is an outcome, right? Abaye, I'm hitting 8-minute pace. I see that. I have direct outcome based on what I've done on my workouts to prove that I can do this. Workouts, races, actual outcomes dictate that. But so too then is performance standards, right? And this is another reason why it's so important to keep pushing when you're tired, right? You're developing the psychological mental toughness, the reminder like, oh, I'm doing really hard things even when I think I can't. Even when my mind is telling me I need to slow down or stop, I was able to push through that, right? So we develop it both in outcome and in standard. Hey, come here, what's up? You want to meet my daughter? Do you want to say hi? You don't want to say hi? Come say hi. There's Isabella. Say hi, everybody. What do you got? What's up? I'll put you on mute. Hold on 1 second, guys.
How's everyone doing?
Sorry. Yeah, is that cool? All right. We were negotiating screen time. That's what we were doing. Yeah. Does anybody know that plight? Anybody else? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So first way, your own personal experience, right? Both in terms of outcome, but then also in terms of like that, how you showed up when it was required. That's part one. Part two is called verbal persuasion, right? So Abaye, you hit the nail on the head here. It's what you hear from other people. Now, one of the most beautiful things about this community is you coach and you cheerlead and you support one another, right? So when you have that messaging of like, I believe in you, right? It's so powerful, right? When you have a coach who's following your training, is like, no, I like based on what you're doing, I think you can do this. I know you can. So powerful, right? So that verbal persuasion of the messaging that we tell is so important. Again, not just an outcome, but also in those performance standards. Okay. The third part is social modeling, right? And this is like a really kind of delicate part. We are deeply influenced by what we see other people do, and particularly by what we see other people that we relate to do. right? So when you look at this community, like, oh, this is my squad, this is my team, I see them pushing through when it's really hard and they didn't think they could. Well, that reinforces the belief that I can do that too. And again, it has nothing to do with paces. It has everything to do with effort, right? Like I saw you really have a tough workout and you gritted through it. That reinforces this belief that I am also able to do that. Now, the fourth part is it's called emotional states, right? We're human beings. We have emotional experiences. So when we're tired, when we're scared, when we're stressed, when we're angry, when we're sad, it's a lot harder to show up and feel like or believe that we're going to be successful. But when we're rested and we're well fed and we're connected and we're full of joy and gratitude, I believe I can do this, right? And so that really kind of lends itself into one of the areas we think about confidence, especially race day performance, is the difference between threat perception and challenge perception, right? So threat is the greatest driver of anxiety or fear we have as human beings in sport and in life, right? So if you're physically threatened, if your well-being is threatened in this moment, that's a fear-based response, right? Fight or flight response, cortisol, adrenaline, right? It gets you ready to handle that in a physical way. Now, psychologically, the same process occurs. When we feel a threat, we're going to have that same physiology in our bodies, but that threat anxiety doesn't come from a real threat to your well-being. It comes from some type of psychological threat. And for athletes, often it goes down this identity platform of if I don't race well, then my identity feels threatened, right? Or then my credibility feels threatened, right? Or my sense of who I am feels threatened. And so pretty soon it's not just 26.2. It's like this whole mix of things that may be threatened if you don't perform the way you want to. The deeper the threat, the more the anxiety, right? And so often what you have is that race day anxiety. When people say like, I'm feeling anxious about this race, I'm like, what feels threatened here, right? The other pillars of that threat are lack of predictability, right? I'm not really sure what the weather is going to be like. Let me check AccuWeather 75 times today to see if it's changed. Nope, still the same, right? So not having predictability, either in terms of what's going to happen or how I'm going to show up, or control, right? And you have some control, but not really. Like I don't know if that wall is going to come or what's going to happen when I hit it, right? All of those things drive threat, drives anxiety. Now, if we can flip that to thinking about it being a challenge, right? Human beings love being challenged. That's why you all are here. That's why you're all in the sport. So if you think about whatever is in front of you from this challenge-based perspective, oh, it's challenging my fitness, it's challenging my mental fortitude, it's challenging my training plan, it's challenging me to really embrace discomfort and find a way through it, whatever that may be. The more you get to a place of embracing it from a challenge-based mindset, the more it's going to reduce that stress and anxiety, the more you're going to feel comfortable stepping into it. So when you put all those things together, those are the building blocks for confidence that we all need to be thinking about, in our daily training here. So again, pause, comments, questions, thoughts, feedback.
So you talked a lot about getting the positive messaging. I had an experience recently that a negative message from someone that I'm close to, and it's like you could have 1,000 people tell you you're amazing, you're good enough, and then the one person that tells you you're not good enough, especially if they're close to you, like that's all you can think about. How do you, and then you hear people using that as fuel, and like the haters, the naysayers, all that stuff. Like, how do you use that or get around that, get past that?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, congratulations, you're a human. That happens to all of us, right? I think that's such a human thing for us to do. Like I got 99 pieces of positive feedback, but that one is just eating me alive, right? Because we just have this negative tendency bias, right? To believe those things much more than the positive. And the more we hold on to it, the more we focus on it, the more we chew on it, the more it's going to sort of eat us up. Right. And so the challenge, there's no easy way to do this, but the challenge is you have to question how much of energy am I going to give that thing? right? Because the more energy I give it, the more it's going to occupy space in my life, right? And it's not about, often people will say in this comparison too, to stop comparing yourself to others. Like, great advice, thanks, I'll just do that. You can't, like, it's not possible to do that. But what you can do is you can choose, once your mind goes there, you can either live there or you can choose to bring it back, right? And you can't bring it back in a sort of grandiose way. You have to come back to an anchor that makes sense to you, right? What are you going to fundamentally believe about who you are, how you operate in the world, how you show up, how you treat other people, what your skill set is? This is why that performance standard is so important, because that becomes your resting place. That becomes your default, no matter what else is happening around you.
So I think this is kind of the same thing, or your answer will be similar, but like, say you hit X pace and then later you're in a training run trying to hit those same paces and it feels way too hard. Like, I should have never been able to hit that pace before. That was a fluke. How do you like switch it and come back to like, no, I can actually do that. That wasn't a fluke. I'm capable of that. Like, that's something I'm really struggling with right now.
Well, in a weird way, you just did it, right? And the difference is, like, I think what often happens is we can say the words, but they don't feel like they have power, right? Because it'll just come back to the sort of like, well, but that was a fluke. That wasn't really authenticated. And again, the work is saying, no. I thank you for that thought. I'm going to come back and I'm going to trust that was legit, right? And so trust is the counterweight to anxiety or doubt, always. And often people, this is true in sport and in life, when we feel anxious, we try to pull away, we try to get rid of the anxiety. It's like, go away, anxiety, go away. It doesn't work. You can't just get rid of anxiety. But the more you can balance it out with trust, the more it neutralizes it. And so the trust, and this is often you hear it like, trust your training, right? But you have to trust that what happened in that moment was legit, right? People don't just run, you don't just run paces accidentally, right? Like, that happened for a reason. That meant that your fitness was there and it all came together. So again, one of the like superpowers, if you will, of being an endurance athlete is you get to build your factors of trust, right? And for those, I think, getting ready to race, I'd recommend, again, practice exercise. There's three ways you can build trust, right? And the first is like the cliche of trust your training, which I don't like. I think it's better to say, like, trust something specific about your training. So when you take a kind of a micro look at this training cycle, getting you ready for this event, this race, what is it that you look for that reminds you of your preparedness, right? And you can look at like, oh, here's my volume, here are my hours, here's my distance, right? Here are those key workouts that were really hard. You do all the outcome factors, but again, it ties into all those performance standards. What are the performance standards that you're going to look back and trust that you executed on? All those moments of doubt that you pushed through, or those moments of pain and discomfort that you pushed through. Those are going to be critical in this training cycle. So you do that part one. Part two, you broaden it a little bit. And then it's not just this training cycle, but then it's you as athlete, right? So thinking about if you've been in this game for a while, and I know it sounds like a lot of you have, like, think back, oh my gosh, all the miles, all the races, all the time you have prepared for other events, both in outcome, but also we could all look back in our career. And I definitely have a handful of moments I could describe clear as day when I didn't think I could continue, or I didn't think I had it in me, and I did it anyway, right? And I pushed through, and those moments of like, oh yeah, there's those moments of strength or mental toughness, right? So again, life as athlete, outcome, but also performance standard. Now, the bigger layer then is life as human, right? And now none of us have gotten to here without a whole bunch of hardship, right? And especially, over the past few years, it's been really hard in a lot of ways for a lot of folks. So thinking about the hardships that you have encountered, that you've endured, that you've faced, the challenges in your life that you've encountered and succeeded with, right? All of that reminding really helps you recognize like just how strong and powerful you are. And then once you build trust in three ways, athlete cycle, athlete general, life as human being, you start to like, you're like, oh yeah, I got this, right? I can go knock out whatever this is in front of me. So it's not about pulling anxiety away. You just try to ratchet it up and you match it. And once it feels like it's matched, oh, that's the sweet spot. Then you feel like you're ready. Thoughts, questions, comments on that stuff?
I think I know what we need to do or I need to do. Practicing that and putting it into place is difficult. Like I know what you're saying and I know all the things you're saying are true, but when you're in the moment, it's hard to remember them.
For sure. And that's why, we think about mental skills training as training, right? Because, like 6x1K, 10x800. I mean, you insert workout. Those are the workouts that I always hated. Apparently, I just told you guys what I didn't like doing. But like, those things are hard, right? They're hard. They're intentionally hard. They're supposed to be hard, but you train them to get better at them. And you have to think about your mental game as being just as trainable as your physical game, right? So here's a platform for that as well. So think about any workout that you have as having 3 time frames for working on the mental game, right? So the first is sort of pre-workout. And this could be as like, oh, I'm tying up my shoes and I'm getting out the door. And I think a lot of runs are probably like that. Now, 6x1K, 10x800 for me was always like the day before, like, oh my God, how am I going to do? Like, I'm supposed to run what kind of paces? Like, oh, but that's going to suck. That's going to be so hard. 24 hours in advance, I'm already in my head about it, right? People relate to that one? Yeah, right. So that is your moment pre-workout to already start putting in the mental pieces, right? And one of those mental pieces can be priming, right? So priming is how are you talking to yourself now in this moment about that workout, right? And all the things that we've talked about, self-efficacy, I got this. I know I got this because of, right? I have the ability to say that to myself. That's credible, right? That's based on fact, right? This is how I'm going to show up. So I'm already going to plan that when it gets hard, here's what I'm going to say to myself, right? Here's the messaging I'm going to work on. Here are the cognitive appraisals that I'm going to work on shifting, knowing that if I do it in the workout, that's going to be the muscle that I build that is ready come race day, right? So you do that work pre-workout. And then you have the workout, right? So in the workout, what are the mental skills that you're implementing? And that could be, I think, easier days, right? More aerobic days. That attentional control thing that I mentioned, that's a great one for those easier efforts, right? Harder efforts, working on credible self-talk, right? Working on that ability to drive your focus to get through that lap or whatever it may be. Those are really, really important moments. The last piece then is, I call it, how do you put your workout away? So when you're done, you hit stop on your watch, you're getting back in the house, you're untying your shoes, you're doing your thing. What are you saying in your mind to wrap that thing up? Knowing that what you do there, it's kind of critical to building that self-efficacy, right? It's that reminder of like, I stuck with it, right? I really nailed those performance standards of showing up, of continuing to push, even if my outcome was off, right? Or if the outcome, you crushed it, like I crushed that today. It's okay to say that to myself. I was on my game. I hit my paces. I feel really good about that. I'm putting that in the mental bank for later, right? And if you just have that approach, it doesn't have to be this extra hour a day of doing mental skills work. You do it with your training. You do it when you start to think about your training. You do it as you put your training away. Like doing that is just going to help this all become so much more tangible when you really want it in a race. Thoughts, comments, questions on that stuff? Is this helpful? Okay. I can never tell when people are quiet. I'm like a comic bombing and this is not landing and not helpful, or people are just digesting and like running it through like how it may work for them.
I was just thinking about when you said there was like one workout that you didn't like, so then you did it more. There was this one hill near my house that I find more difficult. So today I purposely did that hill as part of my run because I was like, okay, I know it's more difficult, but I have to keep doing it to get better at it. So
Yeah. I love it. Like what a great growth oriented mindset. Right. And that's like, again, the mental thing, like you do it and it gets easier and it gets easier. And the mental skills develop alongside your physical training. And if you have an approach to that, a framework of things you're working on, it really can make you a mentally strong athlete. All right, should we talk about injury for a little bit? Yeah, let's talk about this. Again, sorry you're injured. First starting point, always being injured sucks. Like, let's just start there because it doesn't get as much attention as it probably deserves right there. Right. So now how I see it from a psychological perspective, I usually think about it in terms of there's a whole heap of loss that occurs when we're injured. And there's a whole heap of frustration and anxiety that occurs as well. So let's start with the loss piece, right? So the loss piece is not only sort of like loss of functioning, right? So like maybe I can't even, walk without pain, but it's loss of opportunity to get my outlet, right? My daily outlet. It's loss of my training time. It's loss of connection in a lot of ways, right? It's loss of stress management. Like it's all of these losses. So what we really need to start with, what I recommend people do is write down all the losses that you feel, right? All of them, get them down on paper, get them out of your head, write them down. Loss is the greatest driver of human sadness that we have, period, right? Anytime somebody feels sad for whatever reason, what you're really listening for is like, what is lost, right? Now, when we lost a friend, a family member, a colleague, a pet, somebody that we love, we process that as sadness. Now, all of these losses are also processed as sadness, and we need to give that space. Makes sense that you would feel sad. There's tremendous loss that goes alongside not being able to get outside and get those needs met, in addition to feeling as though maybe I won't be able to race, right, or attend that event. So losses are part one. The anxiety side, I often think about like there's this additional heaping, this piling on that occurs. And that piling on is often, there's a lot of anxiety, right? Anxiety often starts with uncertainty. I don't know how long this is going to last. I don't know when I'm going to get back to it. I don't know if I'm going to get back to my former self. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do this without pain again. I mean, you name it. There's all of those things. And with that can come a lot of frustration. So again, really important to label that, to name those things, right? As uncertainty builds, so too does anxiety. So often what we get with being injured is this terrible sandwich of a lot of loss and a lot of anxiety all together, right? And people who don't run don't get it. They just don't get it. And they're like the worst people to talk to about this stuff because they're like, why are you so upset? Like, I don't understand, right? Shouldn't you feel better? Like, thank you very much. You're very helpful. Right. So it's okay to feel all those things. Makes sense to me. Okay. Now, we also think about there's like a 3 time frame generalization around dealing with injuries, both physically and psychologically. So the first phase we call like the acute injury phase, right? And this is when like the injury is just sort of just fresh. It's just happened. And often in that phase, there's a lot of mixed emotion, anger, frustration, sadness, anxiety. There's a lot of uncertainty. And in that phase comes sometimes like some playfulness, like I'm going to just try it anyway, right? I'm going to see if I can, nope, I can't do that. Damn it. Shoot. Okay. So with that phase comes usually trying to determine what's going on, right? I need a prognosis. I need a diagnosis. I need a treatment plan here to know, right? Part 2 is then sort of the healing, rehab, recovery phase. And that's very broad because that can range from I need surgery to I need time off to I need PT to whatever. But usually within that phase, like once uncertainty goes away and we at least have a diagnosis, prognosis, treatment plan, anxiety will start to come down a little bit. Sadness and anger will still usually be there, but we're athletes and we're really good at following training plans. So if we have a training plan, it almost always feels relieving. Like, okay, well, at least I can do the thing, right? I can do this and I feel like I have some control here. That feels good. The last phase is then we call it the return to sport phase. And this is actually the phase that has the most anxiety out of all three, because it's almost always laced with, I'm afraid of getting re-injured. I'm afraid of like worsening whatever niggle I have, right? I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to get back my fitness, or what if I can never get back to the form that I once had, right? So all of these big questions start to pile up when we get to that sort of return to sport phase. And again, often it's misguided. People are like, well, you're back to running and you're back to the group. So you're like, hooray. And like, no. I'm like deeply afraid here. Right. And I don't want anybody to know that I'm deeply afraid. So I just kind of keep that to myself. So that's often what happens kind of in that phase. So again, pause, thoughts, comments, questions as it relates to that stuff.
Yeah, that's all really relatable to me. And I feel like also I've run 7 marathons, but I haven't run one since 2019. So I'm kind of like, is my body like just telling me to stop? And so yeah, there's like all these like negative self-talk that definitely comes into play.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah. We've got about 10 minutes left tonight. So other things that I haven't talked about that people would be curious about, or anything more specific, questions, what comes to mind?
Do you have a favorite or go-to book or author?
Yeah, so it's a good question. Really recommend everybody read Endure by Alex Hutchinson. For those who haven't read that, that's really good. And that really kind of, he's a great storyteller, and he breaks down a lot of these concepts in just a really fun way. It's a great book, action-packed, it's full of great information. It's based on, again, this working model of the psychobiological model of endurance performance. So start there. Another really great book is How Bad Do You Want It by Matt Fitzgerald. And similar, he kind of takes that book sort of chapter by chapter, and each chapter is based on like a specific story, athlete story, and a specific sort of idea or theme or skill, and he puts it into context. So those are both really, really great places. For those who like podcasts, Michael Gervais' Finding Mastery is really good. So Mike is a performance psychologist. He's done all kinds of stuff in his career. And you could kind of hunt around. He's got some really interesting shows with performers across disciplines. So athletes, artists, folks in business, but that's kind of a cool show to break down some of this stuff as well.
On your podcast that I listened to with Jason Fitzgerald, you talked about, I think, if I get this correct, at least like part of your long run, not listening to music, connecting to your breath and everything.
Yep.
Today I had my track workout and I forgot my AirPods. And at first I'm like, dang it, but then I don't know, it went really well. And it actually, in the moment, I was just kind of like, maybe this is better. I don't know. I definitely couldn't do that for a 20-minute long run, but I've definitely I run quite a bit without music and stuff, but yeah, I found that really interesting. And so thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really do recommend spend time without sensory information. Now, it doesn't have to be the entire run, but spend some time getting in tune with your body and your breath and your surroundings, right? To really be paying attention to those things. For those racing, my recommendation, just marathon, no music until at least the halfway point. And there's data that really suggests that there's, music is really great at amping you up and reducing your physical experiences of pain, but only to a certain point. And so if you're listening to it from the word go, you're not getting those benefits. But if you're having something to look forward to at the halfway point, you've got your playlist, you're going to feel not only excitement to get there, but you're going to get those side benefits of getting a little jolt of energy and having that pain reduction that occurs alongside it. So if you can push that off, even like, this is going to sound crazy, but wait till the last 10K of a marathon to listen to music. And I guarantee those last 10K, that last 6 miles is going to feel very different than if you have been, blasting T-Swift from on the
I think you all know how much I love running to music or loved running to music. So this summer I had kind of a fluke accident with like my AirPods, and I was actually running with a pacer for like the first half of the run, and then they left and my AirPods didn't come on, and it was like a progressive 22 miler, and I thought, all right, the last 10 or 12 miles, it's all on me. And it actually went so much better than I thought it did, because just like Dr. Ross mentioned, like you're connecting with your breath, your mind, you can hear your feet on the ground, and you kind of just become one with like the movement. And it also helped me turn a lot of that negative talk that I've had in the past into positive talk. It was much easier to kind of get into the pace and just be more with it. So definitely invitation to try half of a long run or a workout, because I don't listen to music for workouts or long runs, and I raced the Chicago Marathon without music. Anchor knows.
Yeah. Again, like the curiosity, like if you go into it with I'm going to be curious about this. Let me see what this is like without. Let me tap in. It gives you a different relationship, and I think that's worth exploring.
I was just thinking kind of on the other hand, I just ran Boston last year and I didn't have music, but there was like so much going on. It was like almost a little bit overwhelming. It's hard to kind of like zero in on how I felt and my paces. So I didn't know what you would do in kind of that situation where there's just like almost too much sensory information.
Yeah, that's I think a big part of what can happen at the majors, especially, right? Is there's so much going on that, again, that attentional control idea, the more that you train that, the easier it gets, even when it's really loud and boisterous around you, right? But without that, our minds can be very scattered, and we're paying attention to all of those things. And again, part of it may be based on your race goals, right? Like I'm a big believer that not every event has to be a race. Like you can event races. You don't have to race events. Make sense? And going into that clearly, like, oh, this is going to be an event that I'm going to experience and enjoy and just be connected to. Something really fun and beautiful about that.
Awesome. Dina, you made a great point. The sensory overload, especially in the last 2 miles of Boston, it's a lot. So everyone going for the first time, be prepared. Jane knows, Dina knows, Denise, it's a lot. And I hope you all get to experience it at some point. And I just appreciate everyone for coming and spending their time, 90 minutes on a Thursday night to be able to do this. I really appreciate each and every one of you. And Dr. Ross will also be on the Elevate podcast. We're recording on Tuesday, so I think it'll be released on Thursday. And you can continue to train your mind and do everything that you can do to show up as strong as possible on race day or in training or in life.
Sarah, thanks so much for having me. And thanks everybody for being here on a Thursday and spending so much time. And I need to come out to a group run one of these nights in town and hang out with everybody.
Yeah, for sure. I'll give you the details of where we are, what we do.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Good.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.